Commissioner Hodge,
Here.
Commissioner Rice,
Here via Zoom.
Chairperson Mann, Commissioner Tolson,
Here.
Commissioner Gray.
I'm here.
Good evening, commissioners, and welcome to our newest commissioner, Don Gray. Welcome aboard. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this is a time and place set for a nomination and election of Planning Commission Chairperson and Vice Chairperson for 2021. The Simi Valley Municipal Code provides that prior to any vote for the office of Chairperson, the Deputy Director City Planner must take all nominations for the office of Chairperson. All nominations must receive a second. Anyone receiving a nomination may vote for themselves. So for Chairperson, the floor is now open for nominations.
I nominate Chairperson Mann, in as much as he had barely half a year last year. I think he should fix his issues and give him a full year as Commissioner Chairperson.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Commissioner Rice, not as any kind of disparagement to Commissioner Mann, but just sort of, it's been a long time since Commissioner Rice had the position. He did an extremely well job when he did it.
Okay, do we have a second for Commissioner Mann? Hearing none, do we have a second for Commissioner Rice?
I think we're having some audio difficulties. I didn't hear the Pledge of Allegiance or anything in the beginning. First thing I heard was Mr. Gibson speaking. So maybe you need to repeat some things. I see Commissioner Gray is muted.
Hang on. Hang on, let's check the microphones first.
Okay, I got my little, so my question is, can a nominee second themselves?
Well,
If they can nominate themselves, they should be able to second themselves.
I agree.
I agree. In order to move this nomination, I will second Commissioner Mann.
okay, so
And I will second Commissioner Rice. We'll make it easy.
Rice made a second for Commissioner Mann. And Commissioner Mann made a second for Commissioner Rice. So just to be clear, did all the commissioners hear my preamble to the voting and nomination procedures?
Yes.
I believe so.
Yes.
Commissioner Gray, did you hear the preamble?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so for the sake of nominations, we have a nomination for Mann, seconded by Rice, and also a nomination for Rice, seconded by Commissioner Mann. Any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, we will go with the first nomination of Alan Mann for chairperson. Any discussion, or would you like to go to vote?
I'm going to vote.
I'm okay with going to vote.
Sure.
Okay, so we have a new voting system with the new equipment. So our recording secretary, Ms. Dodson, will take your voice votes, and the people in the chamber can place their votes in their new touchpads. Is your microphone on?
And Commissioners Rice, Mann, and, I'm sorry, Commissioners Rice, Hodge, and Gray, I can vote by proxy for you, so you just need to tell me your yes or no, or what your vote is.
I'd rather not vote no on anybody, so maybe it'd be better if we just voted for who we wished to see as the chairperson next year. Maybe that'd be the easiest way.
So the motion is to vote for Alan Mann as chairperson. That's the motion on the table to be voted for. So a yes vote would be yes for Mann, or no vote would be to not accept that nomination. So let's take a vote, yes or no for Mann as chairperson.
Is it working?
Mine's locked in.
Mine's locked in.
I'm not seeing the
This is Commissioner Rice. I'll vote yes.
Okay.
yes.
Yes, this is Commissioner Hodge. I will vote no,
Hodge is no.
respectfully.
Commissioner Gray,
I am new.
You still get a vote.
I still got to vote, huh? Oh, shoot.
Just so you know, Commissioner Gray, Mr. Mann was the chairperson last year. He did a fine job. It was his first time. Commissioner Rice has been on the commission for a number of years, has been the chairperson and vice chairperson a number of occasions. It's been a little while since he did it, which is my impetus in nominating him. It has nothing to do with any adverse thoughts or comments regarding Commissioner Mann, current chairperson Mann.
you can abstain. Commissioner Gray, you can abstain. That is an option on the vote.
Yeah.
That can't be your first vote on the commission.
I'm not feeling that I'm quite qualified to make a decision, so I think I'm gonna have to abstain on this.
So
Can we double check
So
Rice's
the-
vote?
Ken Rice had said yes.
Yes.
right, I got a yes from Ken Rice, so I got 3-1.
3-1. 3-1-1.
3-1-1.
Yeah.
So.
And we need to work on this
Chairperson
system, because I never heard Commissioner Tolson or Commissioner Mann vote.
Oh, sorry, we voted in the chambers on our little new device.
Aha.
I guess to be fair, do you want it to be a verbal vote?
Commissioner Tolson voted yes.
Commissioner Mann, or Chairman Van voted yes.
And Chairman Rice voted yes. So that's 3 votes. Congratulations, Chairman Mann. You were been appointed chairperson for this next year of 2021.
Can I make a brief comment on that? I just want to point out that, I mean, I've been here 10 years, and in the time that I've been here, one of the things I've learned is that, city council has this like rotation or something that they've generally followed. Planning commission hasn't always followed that. In fact, before I was on the planning commission, I know that we've had chair people that have been there for a number of years. So I just wanted to point that out before we move on.
Okay,
Okay, now that we got that out of our system, let's take nominations for vice chairperson for the same 2021 term. So if we could take nominations for office of vice chairperson.
I nominate Commissioner Tolson.
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Any other nominations?
John, you want to nominate anybody?
Okay, not hearing any other nominations. Let's try a vote for Commissioner Tolson as vice chairperson.
Oh, you don't want to, okay.
Please, Ms. Dodson, please go ahead and
Cool.
call for a voice vote, even for the people in the chamber.
Okay, Commissioner Hodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Rice,
Yes.
Chairperson Mann,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolson,
Yes.
Commissioner Gray.
Yes.
Oh, like that. First official vote. Congratulations, Commissioner Gray.
Exhausting.
Okay, congratulations, Vice Chairperson Tolson. So with that, we do not have to rearrange the nameplates in the chamber. So, and I believe we are still set up in the new system as far as voting seats, so we can move forward to the next agenda item.
Okay, approval of agenda. May I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
Move to
approval.
I'm sorry, got stepped on. Who was that?
I believe it was me, Tim Hodge.
Okay, Commissioner Hodge, do I have a second?
A second.
Gray. Motion is made by Commissioner Hodge, with second by Commissioner Gray. Unless there are any objections, the agenda stands approved. May I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Motion is made by Commissioner Rice. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tolson. Unless there are any objections, the minutes are approved. Declaration of conflict. The secretary will read the declaration of conflict.
If any member of the Planning Commission may have a conflict of interest or any reason why that member must abstain from consideration of any matter on this agenda, he or she should so declare at this time.
Are there any declarations of conflict? Hearing none, we'll move on to public statements. This is the time allotted for public statements or comments from on all items other than public hearing items. Due to the closure of the city council chambers of Executive Order N2920, comments can be made via Zoom. Did we receive any requests for any individuals who would like to make public comments?
There are no requests.
Hearing no requests for public statements. Correspondence. Is there any correspondence from the Deputy Director, City Planner?
Yes, Chairperson Mann, we did receive a correspondence, a letter from Travis Foster, and I believe you all received a copy of that in your packets or via email. And also, we have a supplemental agenda item for item 13.A.1 regarding the proposed beekeeping ordinance. That memorandum was also provided to you, and you should have also received that for your review tonight.
This may be out of the order, but regarding the correspondence, I'm assuming, and I did ask you this, I just want to make sure that Mr. Foster did receive a response in some way, shape, or form, or will receive a response indicating whose purview this bridge would fall under. I don't want to think it's just fallen on deaf ears.
Yes, after tonight's meeting, staff is going to prepare a written response to Mr. Foster to address that matter.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, consent calendar. We have nothing on consent. Continued business. It appears that the CUP S744 Mod 1 ZS 751 was unable to complete their requested information from us prior to tonight's meeting, and it looks like there's just a consent item for a continuance to a date uncertain. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
And hearing any objections to a consent approval, This will just be pushed off to a date uncertain to be done and come back to us by the applicant and by the city's own planning. New business. This is the time and place set for a public hearing on the consideration of ZS754 to amend portion of Title IX of the Simi Valley Municipal Code for establishing regulations for allowing beekeeping, apiculture activities in single-family and open space zones, and the determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Qualities Act. Are there any ex parte communications to report? Hearing none, may we have an oral report on this matter from staff?
Good evening, Chairperson Mann, members of the Planning Commission. We have a full staff team on this one tonight. Our senior planner, Jennifer Santos, is here at the table, and also our city consultant, Jerry Hittleman, will be also making the presentation, and additional staff are on hand to answer any questions. So I will turn it over to Jennifer, and we could get started.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to introduce Jerry Hittleman, who will be providing the presentation tonight, and I'll also be assisting with any support for him. Jerry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Jennifer. And good evening, Chair and Planning Commission members. We do have a PowerPoint presentation. Can you see that on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll start with background information.
I'm sorry, this is Commissioner Hodge. I'm unable to see the presentation.
Yeah, I can't. Commissioner Rice, I can't see it either.
Yeah, either can I, actually.
And it was up, but then it disappeared.
Okay, we're gonna work on that. Not me, somebody else, but. No, Commissioner Gray, we can see.
Can everybody see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
I can, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Great
Okay,
job.
thank you, Jennifer. And good evening again, Chair and Planning Commission members. In April 2019, the City Council requested information on the zoning requirements related to beekeeping due to community concerns raised over limitations placed on backyard beekeeping in Simi Valley. Then at the September 14th, 2020 City Council meeting, staff was directed to receive input from the neighborhood councils and analyze various issues related to beekeeping regulations and bring a draft ordinance to the Planning Commission and City Council. Some issues identified at the council included: should neighbors be notified about beekeeping activities? Bee allergy concerns? Would beekeeping be allowed for both renters and owners? What is the city's liability? Explore city registration in Bee City, USA, and also present draft ordinances to the Planning Commission and City Council. Next slide, please. In November of 2020, staff presented the draft text amendments to all 4 neighborhood councils, who had basically the following comments. They thought that perhaps a smaller lot size minimum of 7,000 square feet should be allowed. The recommendation for a minimum 10-foot setback for beehives from property lines. They had talked about bee allergy concerns. They recommended notification of neighbors. But overall, they supported the proposed amendment that is before you tonight. And tonight, of course, we are at the Planning Commission for your recommendation to City Council. Before we get into beekeeping regulations, here are some backyard beekeeping basics for those of you who may not be familiar with beekeeping. Beekeepers throughout the country have hives in their backyards and even on rooftops in urban areas. Special care is needed to ensure that you have healthy bees that will not be a nuisance to your neighbors. To do this, they It's recommended that there be a minimum 6-foot-high fence or shrubbery surrounding hives to ensure a flight path above people's heads. That there be a water source on the property, and this is important, form of a large half barrel or some type of pond or other water source. You see an example on the slide, and this discourages use of a neighbor's pool and other water sources on neighboring properties. It's also recommended that young queen bees be used to discourage swarming, and they should be changed out every 2 years. So well-kept beehives basically discourage bees from becoming angry or defensive. On a statewide basis, beekeepers are required to comply with all California state food and agricultural codes pertaining to bee management and honey production. Some regulations that on the state level include a requirement that all beekeepers must register with the California Department of Food and Agriculture. The state also regulates pesticides that are toxic to bees. Those are some examples. Other Ventura County jurisdictions, with the exception of Ojai, only allow beekeeping in rural, agricultural, or open space zoning districts. General requirements throughout the county include, and this is for larger lots, that the beehives be located at least 400 feet from an urbanized area, that they be located 50 feet from common property lines with neighboring properties unless mutually agreed to by owners, that they be 100-foot distance from public road, street, or highway. They have adequate water supply be provided on-site and near hives, and that registration is also required with the Ventura County Agricultural Commissioner. Now, Ojai actually allows beekeeping in all residential districts if the following requirements are met: that each colony must be maintained in movable frame hives, that an adequate water supply be required at all times, adequate space be maintained in the hive to prevent overcrowding and swarming, get angry bees if they're too crowded. Notification of neighbors within 100 feet in writing is required. Registration with the Ventura County Agricultural Commissioner. Number of hives is based on the lot size in Ojai. The hives should be a minimum of 5 feet from the property lines and minimum 20 feet from public street or sidewalk. And the hive entrance should be directed away from the nearest property line. Now, in Ventura County, the Ventura County Agricultural Commissioner has countywide requirements for beekeeping that include all beehives and beekeepers must be registered with the Agricultural Commissioner. This office responds to complaints from neighbors of beekeepers if complaints come up, and their oversight is geared more toward agricultural operations and discourages residential backyard beekeeping due to potential conflicts with neighbors. Now, however, I'd like to point out that the Ventura County Planning Department is actually working on a backyard beekeeping ordinance that is tentatively scheduled for their planning commission in March of 2021, so a couple of months from now. Now, we also did some research in some cities in the LA County area. And the next two slides contain regulations for the cities of LA and also Santa Monica. Los Angeles actually approved backyard beekeeping regulations in 2015. This took them about 3.5 years to process the ordinance. And they had many community meetings and an initial meeting that attracted actually 2,500 people. Now moving on to Santa Monica, the next slide, please. Santa Monica has had backyard beekeeping regulations actually since 2011. And they require annual registration with the city's animal control office. And in talking to them, they said they receive approximately 2 to 3 beekeeping requests per year, and they have a few complaints each year. Now, the city of Simi Valley actually has some beekeeping regulations, and zoning districts where beekeeping is currently allowed in Simi Valley are all properties in the animal overlay zones, lots in the residential very low zone that are 3 acres or greater, lots in the residential estate zone, RE zone, that are 3 acres or greater, and lots in the open space zone that are 3 acres or greater in size as well. Now, an administrative conditional use permit is required for beekeeping on properties outside the animal overlay districts. That they're only allowed on properties that are 20,000 square feet or larger. However, there are currently really no specific standards for beekeeping practices in the city for residents. Now, moving on though, there are some very basic regulations that include that beehives must be maintained so as not to become a nuisance. Beehives and associated structures are required to be located at the rear of the property, at least 5 feet from the rear and side property lines, and at least 50 feet from legally existing off-site habitable structures other than the residence of the property owner. Now, as stated in the staff report, there are 2 regulatory options. There are options A and B for beekeeping have been analyzed in the report. Now, under option A, this would involve amendments to the following Simi Valley Code sections that are related to animal keeping, zoning clearances, administrative actions, conditional use permits, and also the definition section. Now, moving on for option A, the draft proposed backyard beekeeping allowance and approval process is shown on this slide. Beekeeping would be allowed in the, as you can see, the open space, RE, RVL, RL, RM, and residential moderate single family zones. Now for lot sizes between 8,000 and 20,000 square feet, an administrative action is required if the property is in the A, the farm animal, L, limited farm animal, and H, horse overlay zones. An administrative CUP or conditional use permit is required if they are not in an animal overlay zone. Also required would be that a notice be sent to property owners within 100 feet, similar to Ojai. If the applicant or a concerned citizen has an issue, a public hearing will be held prior to the permit action. Now for lot sizes, 20,000 to 3 acres in size, a zoning clearance would be required. And for lots 3 acres or greater, there would be no permits. However, even though there's no permit requirement, compliance with the beekeeping regulations, which I'll go through in a second, will be required. And also please note that a zoning clearance, administrative action, or administrative conditional use permit requires approval by the city planner. Now we'll move into the proposed requirements. Next slide, please. So proposed requirements for all beekeeping activities in the city are proposed to ensure that beekeepers maintain healthy backyard beehives and minimize any interactions with neighboring properties. So the first one is no more than 2 hives be allowed per property. However, a beekeeper can request additional hives via an administrative conditional use permit, regardless of the lot size and overlay zone designation. So you can go 2 or greater with an administrative CUP. Hive entrances shall be directed away from the nearest property line. Hives shall not be placed within 20 feet of the front property line and 7 lineal feet from a side property line or rear property line. They shall not be placed within 20 lineal feet of any public street, sidewalk, or other public thoroughfare, including HOA properties and/or easements that people can walk on. The hive shall be screened by a minimum 6-foot-high fence or shrubbery as well. Moving on to additional regulations, an adequate water supply with adequate supply of water shall be provided for bees at all times on the property where they are kept, and this discourages bee visitation, as I mentioned before, at neighboring swimming pools, hose bibs, etc. Each colony shall be maintained in movable frame hives. Hives shall be requeened at least once every 2 years, and this prevents swarming. And an adequate space shall be maintained actually in the hive to prevent overcrowding and swarming or aggressive bee behavior. We have some more, 2 more slides of regulations. Each beehive will be required to be registered with the Ventura County Agricultural Commissioner, as well as being kept in compliance with all state regulations governing bee management and honey production. The beekeeping permit may only be granted to a resident of the home and will not be transferable to a new renter or owner. Now, for lots 8,000 to 20,000 square feet, as I mentioned previously, prior to issuance of an administrative action or CUP, a notice shall be sent 10 calendar days prior to the decision date to property owners within 100 feet. And no hearing will be held unless a hearing is requested by the applicant or an affected person, typically a neighbor. Here is the last slide for option A. And actually these regulations would apply to both option A and option B. So all beekeeping permits shall be subject to review by the director within 1 year after their initial approval as a result of a complaint by any person affected by beekeeping activities. In the event of an alleged violation of beekeeping permit, the permittee shall submit proof of compliance for city review. And then beekeeping permits issued may be subject to revocation if there are repeated violations of these standards that I just went through, and if that occurs on a regular basis. So that's option A. Now we'll move on to option B, and then we'll do a comparison slide next after this. But option B would only allow beekeeping in the animal overlay zones, A, L, and H overlay zones, for properties that are zoned residential mod, residential medium, residential low, residential very low, residential estate, and open space lots that are 8,000 square feet to 3 acres or more with actually a zoning clearance. So this would be a quicker, more ministerial process under option B. Proposed beekeeping standards referred to again under option A would also be applied to under option A would be applied to option B. There would be a requirement that the location of the beehives also under this option be at least 50 feet from any legally existing offsite structure used for human habitation other than that of the residence of the beekeeper. So now we've gone through the 2 options, and on the next slide, we'll go through a comparison of option A and option B. And you can see that the main difference between options A and B are shown on this slide. As you can see, the major difference occurs in lots 8,000 to 20,000 square feet in size. Under option A, we have a little bit stricter requirements. Backyard beekeeping is allowed with an administrative action in the animal overlay zones. Beekeeping is also allowed with an administrative CUP on residential lots outside the animal overlay zones. Also, A notice is required to property owners within 100 feet for both of these permits. Now, as you can see, the difference is under option B, beekeeping on lots 8,000 to 20,000 square feet are allowed only in the animal overlay zones with a zoning clearance. This limits the area for backyard beekeeping citywide, but utilizes a zone clearance or quicker ministerial process. So those are the differences between these two options. Now with that, we recommend that staff recommends approval to the City Council of ZS 754 with either option A, and again, option A is with an administrative approval or conditional use permit for properties 8,000 to 20,000 square feet, or option B mainly is zoning clearance for animal overlay zone properties only in areas from 8,000 to 20,000 square feet in size. So those, with that, we're open for questions, and thank you.
Chairperson Mann, can I ask a couple questions?
By all means, please. Yes, Commissioner Rice.
Okay. Mr. Hittleman, the first, would people be required to take the, I mean, I don't know what the requirement is to get registered through the county agricultural commissioner, but would they have to do that?
I think you need to repeat it. I think you broke up during part of that.
Okay, so my question was, would somebody doing this, besides getting registered with the county agricultural commissioner, would they also have to take a county beekeeping course?
Commissioner Rice, currently the Ventura County does not have a beekeeping course. In our research, we found out that other counties may have that, but currently they do not in Ventura County.
Okay. And my second question was, you mentioned that these hives would have to be 50 feet from a habitable structure that's not the beekeeper, right? So that means that if you have a neighbor who has a house within 50 feet of your hive, that hive would not be allowed. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Now, that is only for option B. We left that out of option A.
Okay. So it's, thank you. That's the only questions I had.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Mann, this is Commissioner Hodge, or I'm sorry, Chairperson Mann, this is Commissioner Hodge. I'd like to reserve my questions, and just in case there happens to be any public testimony. I can't tell from here if there is or no if anybody has submitted anything. But I do have a series of questions.
Certainly. Do any other commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Tolson?
I do have
Gray? Sorry.
one question for Mr. Hittleman. Is there anything in option A or B that requires any kind of wall that's been suggested in other places?
Yes, the regulation for either a 6-foot-high wall or shrub between the hives and surrounding properties would be a requirement for both options, A and B. They both be subject to that regulation.
Thank you.
Chairperson Mann, if you don't mind, I just wanted to let you know that our David Huerta is on the line. He's actually from the Ventura County Agricultural Commissioner office. If you have any questions, he's also available to answer them.
Perfect. Thank you. Commissioner Gray, any questions?
I do have a couple of questions. One, I'm going to piggyback on that last question. My concern is not necessarily a fence, but a shrub, because is there any sort of density that's required on a shrub? Because I could understand if something was a dense shrub versus something that was more whimsical, that may not be something that's going to prevent bees from going upwards. Do we have anything that says any sort of density on those shrubs?
Thank you. Interesting question. No, we just said shrubs. We don't talk about the density, but when I think about it, there are quite a variety of shrubs out there. So,
And then my other question is, when it comes to the requeening every 2 years, does the homeowner or the beekeeper, do they get documentation to prove that, yes, here's my documentation stating that I got requeened, last June or something? Do they provide documentation to show that?
I believe they would show documentation. That might also be a good question for the person from the agricultural commissioner's office,
Okay.
because they're regulating that right now.
Sorry, what is the name? David? Of our agricultural commissioner?
Yes, David Huerta. If you'd like to open up the public testimony, we could ask him questions.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Let them do that.
Hi, David, can you hear us?
Hi. Yeah, I can hear you guys. For requeening, we don't require any documentation for that. That's on the beekeepers. So we don't regulate that part of it.
Okay.
It sounds like that would be the city's regulation, and we would require some documentation, I would imagine.
Any other commissioners have any questions? Okay, I have a few. Mr. Hilterman, are beekeepers registered, I think you said, with the state of California?
Correct.
Department of Agriculture, or who are they registered with?
The State Department of Food and Agriculture.
So all beekeepers are supposed to be registered with them, correct?
That's correct, throughout the state.
And does the county require a separate registration with the county for beekeeping? Mr.
I
Huerta?
believe so, but we have the expert here. I'd like to defer to David Huerta.
It's the same registration. So it's a state requirement that we collect the registrations locally.
Okay. Mr. Hiltman, one of your proposed beekeeping standards, you have, however, beekeeper can request additional hives. So anybody that registers with the county on behalf of the state or with the state on behalf of the county, by definition, they are now a beekeeper?
That's correct. And for additional hives, they would have to go through a conditional use permit process. So it'd be a little bit higher level of scrutiny over their hives.
Okay. So anybody that decides they want to keep bees, they still need to go the route and get registered with the state and with the county, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know of what cities require or offer a quote-unquote beekeeping course that Commissioner Rice was talking about?
The one I saw was either the city or county of Santa Barbara is the closest. I'm not, but there could be others. I just I didn't notice any in Los Angeles. Again, maybe David Huerta would know.
Mr. Huerta, back to you.
I'm unaware of any courses in other counties or cities.
Okay. And one last one, again, under your proposed, Mr. Hilterman, the proposed beekeeping standards, each beehive will be required to be registered with the county. Is that each beehive or each beekeeper is registered with the county? Do you actually register the hives or just the keeper of the hives?
I'll defer to Mr. Huerta on that.
So each beekeeper is registered, but they registered their amount of hives.
Okay.
So we have one registration per beekeeper, but they have to update us with the hives coming in and out of the county.
Okay, I guess I lied. I have another question. Is there a regulated or a standard size hive, both in volume and number of bees?
We don't regulate that specifically. There are standards for beekeeping, but we're not regulating that specifically.
Because we've all seen pictures of beekeepers that are like, a large, moving box type thing, and they all seem to be uniform because they all stack together. Is that pretty well the standard, or are there commercial industrial ones that are just these huge behemoth hives?
No, the ones we see the most, it's basically, imagine the 3 boxes. There's a shorter, the super on top,
Right?
and then there'll be 2 deeps below it. And that's basically what we see mostly, or at all.
Okay.
In terms of like lid shape, the type of frames on the inside, all that stuff can vary, but typically we always see the same standard 3 boxes on top of each other.
Okay. Yeah, if we have no more commissioner questions, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public testimony.
Actually, do you mind if I have another question real quick?
No problem, please.
I guess my question has to do with what if somebody gets they qualify either under option A or option B, and a neighbor has a high allergy of bees. Under A, they would have to notify under those lot sizes, but you could even have larger lots, and even you're talking about the zoning clearance, which would mean the 7 feet, 20 feet zoning, correct? So what would happen if somebody has a bee allergy and now all of a sudden they find out that they're now living next to, even if they don't have to go through the actual administrative actions or even to get a permit, that all they need is the clearance, but the neighbor has a bee allergy? That's going to create, life-threatening situation. Is there anything that we have oversight that would stipulate that this particular area would not be able to have bees?
Well, first of all, as we know, bees occur naturally in the environment, so they'll be all over the place anyway, but they might be a little more concentrated if you have the beehives in the backyard. But all of the regulations you saw, which would apply to both options A and B, those are meant to discourage and really minimize any bees crossing property lines and going dangerously into other properties or being a nuisance and swarming. So that would apply to both options. And we need for the commissioners tonight to choose either A or B to move forward to the city council, or what your advice would be. Now, under option A, we do have the notice, so at least people will be notified. Under option B, there is no notification. So I hope, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, with that, let's go ahead and open up this portion of the hearing to public testimony. Do we have any requests from any members of the public wishing to testify?
We have no attendees waiting to speak.
Are there any? Okay, sorry.
And if the Deputy Agriculture Commissioner, Mr. Huerta, wants to make a statement at this time, he's also allowed to do that if he chooses.
Okay. Mr. Huerta, would you like to make a statement or anything?
No, I'm okay with answering questions as they come up.
Okay, perfect. Any commissioners have, now that we open public testimony, I guess we'll go on. Is there any comments from staff? I'm sorry?
Chairman Mann?
Yes.
Before you close the public testimony, I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Huerta.
Oh, by all means, please.
By the way, thank you for appearing tonight. We appreciate the intel. Mr. Huerta, what specifically, if anything, does registering do other than registering that the person has the bees? Does it provide some form of requirements? Are there things that the person must do, insurance the person must put up, demonstration of proof that this person knows what they're doing, the ability to have a property over a certain size? What other than registering with the Ventura County, the agency that you work with, does registering do?
So when growers and applicators are applying pesticides to their crops, specifically flowering crops that have a pesticide that can harm bees, the idea is registered beekeepers can be notified that a application is going on in their area. So that that is the primary purpose of registration, is so an applicator can notify the beekeepers within a mile of the application site to protect their bees.
So I can see that as tremendously valuable to the bees, and that's, we all appreciate the work that the bees do and the things that they provide us. But what my question really is, and I think that you just answered it, there really is no particular benefit to homeowners who live near persons who are beekeepers, specific to their registration with your agency, correct?
If there was a complaint, we know who to go to. So there's that. But specifically, no. And we wouldn't necessarily even tell homeowners where those bees are. They're under Food and Ag. It is held confidential to us and the state.
Okay, I appreciate it. Now I'll turn it back to Chairman Mann to continue the meeting. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, if we have no other questions or comments regarding the public testimony portion of the hearing, are there any comments from staff regarding statements made during public hearing?
No comments.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Are there any comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission?
I have questions of staff.
Please, Commissioner Hodge, feel free.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to mention that I went back and watched the City Council meeting of September 14, 2020, and the one in which they requested that staff go forward and come back with a proposed ordinance and to take it to the neighborhood councils and to bring it to the Planning Commission. And nowhere did they say that we needed to come back with option A or option B. So I just want to, I hate to use this word because normally it's not something we talk about, but I really object to the phrase that we have to come back with option A or option B. We can come back with any recommendation to the Planning Commission, to the City Council that we decide is appropriate. And I hate to say that, but Mr. Hittleman, you agree with that, correct?
Yeah, if you would like to, you can mix or match options A or B. It's your recommendation.
Or we could kick any part of option A or option B out, or limit it to something else, or come up with option C, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I didn't mean to pin you down like that, but I mean, I really, that's a big deal for me on this issue, especially based upon what I think I'm going to find out when I ask some of these other questions. Okay, so I'd like to find out a little bit. One of the things that the council did ask about was they wanted to know that the cities that allow beekeeping and the circumstances under which they allow them. And the staff report provides information in this particular report regarding Los Angeles and Santa Monica and now Ojai. And in I can't remember if it was in our staff report as an exhibit or if it was in the exhibit to the City Council. I think it was actually to ours. There's a whole list of cities in the county of Orange that identify whether or not they provide for beekeeping or not. Now, the question that was included in that particular report was whether or not the cities allow residential beekeeping. The city of Simi Valley currently allows residential beekeeping, correct?
That is correct. It's in the animal overlay zones for larger lots.
Sure. So I took a look at the staff report quite carefully, and I found out, and I looked at that exhibit that was prepared, but apparently by some university. I don't know what year, but it listed the 35 jurisdictions in the county of Orange, including the county and then the city entities. And of those jurisdictions, the county did not allow for beekeeping in residential lots. 18 of the other cities, of the other 34 cities, did not allow any beekeeping in residential lots. And then there were 12 rather, that did allow some form of beekeeping on residential lots. And I took a look at a couple of them. There were some websites there. And I took a look at a couple of them to find out, what are the restrictions that they have on some of these residential lots. You have the city of Laguna Beach as an example. It's unlawful for any person to maintain a hive or swarm of bees within the city without a permit. And that was indicated in that report. And I thought, okay, great, a permit, but what does the permit require? Which is what I was more interested in. And this particular city is extremely vague. It talks about first you have to obtain a conditional use permit from the planning commission, not administrative from the city, that the applicant shall substantiate to the satisfaction of the animal services manager that the keeping of the bees would not jeopardize, endanger, or otherwise constitute a menace to the public health or safety, and that all beehives, colonies, apiaries, and swarms of bees are registered with the Orange County Department of Agriculture. I'll bet I hope they do as much as Ventura County does and Mr. Huerta's group of folks, but I don't know. The other one was quite detailed, and naturally it's not at my fingertips at the moment. I'll find it for you in just a second. It was, as I recall, Shazam, Sam. I'll find it. It was another city that's, oh, here it is. That's not it. It was another city that had a long laundry list of problems, requirements. I believe it was San Clemente. In San Clemente, you could have beekeeping. Here it is. You could have beekeeping, but the minimum size lot was 15,000 square feet. There was a number of different circumstances where you could only have it if you were in single family of a 40,000 or another circumstance, 20,000 square feet zoning, and hillside residential. There were all kinds of things such as identification of bee sensitive property. For example, you have circumstances where people are living near the elderly. They have small children, maybe there's schools around, individuals with medical conditions or confined animals that inhabit or frequently are at more risk of honeybees stinging were to occur. And I was thinking none of this is in the ordinance that's proposed, although we do have circumstances where there could be administrative conditional use permits. And I assume that these things would be included in the considerations, but it's not stated. Would you agree with that, Mr. Hittleman?
That's correct. That's a good summation of what's going on in Orange County. And there could be conditions of approval, I think, as you stated, with an administrative conditional use permit, another permit.
So you've got to take a look at Ojai, and I realize that we apparently assumed the language or borrowed the language from Ojai regarding notification. And I was thinking to myself, it's 10 days notification for mailing. So you mail it. Maybe you mail it on a Friday. Maybe it comes to the person who receives it on the next Tuesday or Wednesday. I mean, mail doesn't go perhaps as fast as it used to, and not at all times of the year. So then they get this, and maybe they don't see it for a couple days. Maybe they're on vacation. Maybe they work late, and they see it now. It's the weekend. Bingo! 10 days are gone. And I was rather shocked that Ojai would impose this sort of a obligation upon their populace to give notification of any concern about it within 10 days of mailing. So you add the mailing time on to that 10 days, in addition to somebody gets it, has an opportunity to read it, and it isn't the weekend and they can call the city. So would you agree, Mr. Hittleman, that would be the circumstance under that 10-day rule? You need to unmute. Mr. Hittleman, you need to unmute.
Yes, that is correct. Be a 10-day notice in writing.
Okay. Now, and that would only be for people within 100 feet of the home, because that's as far as it goes. Now, it came to me that what happens if somebody moves in next door, and the person who moves in next door has small children, has a bee allergy, and some other reason that this other person has already gotten their permit, they've given their notice, the city only has a year to take a look at that permit, and after that, it seems to be, gold standard. What happens is there any provision in either of the considerations or anywhere where the other cities said what happens if somebody moves into the area and they could be adversely impacted by the bees?
I have not seen that in other cities we researched, and it's not in this ordinance. That's correct.
Now, Listening to the city council meeting, I heard them ask the questions that you quite accurately identified early on in your PowerPoint presentation. Nowhere did I hear them say that they thought that residential moderate, residential medium would be good. I do recall Council Member Luevano's commenting, and several of the other council members agreeing with her that they were concerned about the size of the lots. Could you provide me some basis, some evidentiary basis or entomology, standard that caused us to choose 8,000 square feet as the smallest lot that we would agree to?
The minimum lot size, 8,000 square feet, was that came about through research of other cities, such as you mentioned, Ojai, Santa Monica doesn't even have a limit, and the city of Los Angeles allows, I think, up to 8,000 or 6,000 square feet lots. And because they had minimal complaints or any issues, we felt that a 8,000 square foot lot size would be appropriate. At the neighborhood council meetings, we had one neighborhood council member who wanted to go down to 7,000 square feet. But we held, as you can see, the line at 8,000 square feet. So it's based on research that we did.
So it's based on research as to what other cities are doing. Is it also based on any entomologic science with respect to, people who are experts in bees as to bee behavior?
No, that was not taken into account, although we just started going by the other cities' regulations.
And the reason I asked that question is because the staff report makes quite clear that the size of the lot could impact the safety that it provides. And as I recall, there's a provision, or rather a statement in the staff report that references that it is not felt that lots less than 8,000 square feet provide sufficient, I can't remember the language, but rather wouldn't be big enough to provide safety for neighbors nearby. I can find that specific language if necessary. I'm sure that people read it. And so I'm thinking that, if the only reason that we're using this number is because Los Angeles used it and Ojai used it, Santa Monica was silent on it. I'm curious why we're not also taking a look at the preponderance of the use of the cities with all of the ones in Orange County that don't allow it at all, those that use it that require a minimum of 15,000 square feet, and our own sister cities in Ventura County that only allow it in rural, that's in the county, rural agriculture, which is Thousand Oaks, and not in residential at all in Camarillo Moore Park, except in Oxnard for agricultural purposes. So, I mean, I'm glad I asked you the question, because I think what you're telling me is that we base this on LA and Santa Monica and nothing else.
And also right, and also just the size of the lot and configuring a beehive on the lot, or 2 hives, a minimum of 2 hives, and being able to put the barriers in, the 6-foot shrub or fence, also to meet the setbacks and so forth, and also have other backyard uses. So we're looking at those factors more from a planning standpoint.
Well, is it true that both of the options that are proposed, and in essence, if you take a look at any of them, or assuming that they were something standalone in option C, that the size of the lot means the entire lot, 8,000 square feet, which includes the front of the house, the size of the house, the garage, and the backyard, correct?
That's correct.
And those backyards can be of varying sizes.
Correct.
And you are not recommending that we put beekeeping in front or side yards that are otherwise not within, in essence, the confines of the backyard, correct?
Unless the lot has, for instance, a larger side yard, they can do it, as long as they're 7 feet from the property line. But they'd also have to be a certain distance from the front property line as well.
Yeah, I saw that. So 20 feet from the property line in the front, 7 feet from the side yard.
Right, and the rear.
So you're saying that there could be 0 barrier between a beehive in a front yard as long as it's 20 feet back and from the property line and 7 feet from the side yard?
Yes, and it's screened by a fence or a shrub.
And the idea is that the fence or the shrub would prevent bees from flying lower than 6 feet.
That's correct. Bees tend to fly up and over and would not come down at a lower level immediately.
Well, not immediately, but at some point they do, especially if there's flowers, et cetera. Because I take walks all the time, and there's a big batch of plants on my walk that I walk right by bees. Look, I think bees are great, and I'd love to find a way to enhance the number of bees and pollinators, and I understand the concept here. I also understand the concept of, you know, we're providing something which once we give this, it's going to be very, very, very difficult for the city ever to take away. So once this becomes a text amendment to our, you know, zoning regulations, you could essentially sign yourself up to being stuck with it. And I can't imagine, you know, figuring out ways to to modify it. Oh, by the way, that 8,000 square foot thing was in paragraph 9 under findings and alternatives. That property smaller than 8,000 square feet typically would not have sufficient space to safely maintain beehives along with backyard uses. There's nothing in here that I see about other backyard uses. Say, for example, somebody has a yard and they have a pool, or maybe they don't have a pool, but they have a accessory dwelling unit. And somebody wants to, you know, they say, hey, I've got 8,000 square feet and I'm 7 feet away from my neighbor and I'm 20 feet away from the front yard. They could pretty much be allowed to keep bees, couldn't they?
They could, that's correct.
One of the questions that the city council asked, and you included it in or whoever prepared it included it in the staff report, was the liability issues. Was that ever determined?
The report was reviewed by the attorney's office, city attorney's office. And they felt that given the regulations and maybe adding an indemnification clause in the conditions would ensure the city from liability.
So the beekeeper would have to sign some sort of indemnity agreement to defend and indemnify the city in case they got sued?
We don't have that in the ordinance, but that's typically a condition of other types of permits.
You know, when I hear something like that, I also hear the acceptance that it is, you know, creates potential hazards for people. Okay, I already asked that question. There's a statement in paragraph on page 3, prior to the second full paragraph before option A. It's the it says any city enforcement would be limited only to placement, quantity of hives, and if a supply water is available. The manner of keeping the bees in proper care would be referred to by the County Agricultural Commission as the subject matter expert. I thought we may have heard something different than that tonight. Can you explain that?
Well, actually, if you look at the regulations, they are quite detailed. And it doesn't limit it to just those regulations. So we have different layers. We have the city regulations, you'd have the county, and you'd have the state. So we felt that with those 3 layers, it would protect or minimize any nuisance to neighbors or surrounding properties.
Commissioner Hodge, our Deputy Director, Mara Mulch with Code Enforcement is in the chamber tonight if you have any code enforcement questions.
Well, actually, I do have a code enforcement question. We have additional rules in here about changing out making sure we have a new queen every 2 years and making large enough space within a certain area. And then we also have early on in the staff report a description about the 12 complaints, and the complaints, at least one of those complaints, I can't remember if it was one or more than one, where we didn't have access and are not able to determine whether or not there was a violation or not. I'm a little bit concerned about enforcement. And so if I can have someone speak to enforcement.
Absolutely. Good evening. So in kind of a broad response to that, and then if there's follow-up questions, please let me know. As we've spoken before with the commission, as various amendments to the code have come forward, any expansion of use on private properties does pose an enforcement issue. When you look at it from a standpoint of issuing a permit or going through a permitting process, the hope is that somebody is committing to certain standards and they're doing public noticing and things along that lines that would show that people are really committed to meeting those standards on an ongoing basis. However, that being said, any person who chooses not to continue to meet those standards poses the same enforcement problem of not having a permit. So if we cannot gain voluntary access, whether there's a permit granted or whether zoning conditions, we still need voluntary access by a property owner to enter their private property to verify violations or that standards are being met. With the issue of beekeeping, as noted in the report, there were several complaints filed with the city over the past several years. I think it was a total of 12 complaints over a 3-year span. Many of those were naturally occurring bees. So bees do create some concern, whether they're naturally occurring or whether it's actually beekeeping activities. And furthermore, several complaints were lodged against people that were properly keeping bees within the zoning standards that we currently have. There was several that, I think there was 2 within those that were not lawful due to the zoning and they were abated. And then the remaining 2 violations, we couldn't gain access to the property to verify whether they were naturally occurring bees or whether or not they were doing beekeeping activities at those properties. So any property owner that's not going to provide the city voluntary access to their property will pose an enforcement issue. Additionally, if we have additional layers of regulation from the city, it's going to, in some ways, could prolong our enforcement efforts. And let me explain why that is. If we issue a conditional use permit and someone's not abiding by the terms and conditions, then we have an obligation to revoke that prior to pursuing other remedies within the courts. Just kind of a reasonable expectation that we would exhaust all the city's remedies, which would be to revoke the permit and then move forward with any additional remedies available to us through the courts. However, if you have someone who is really intent on not complying and we go to revoke their permit, that doesn't mean that they'll immediately comply and stop the activity. Should they not stop the activity, we would then have to escalate the case onto the court system. So it does pose, there's some pros and cons of issuing a permit. The pros is notifying the existing neighbors at that moment in time. It's being very clear about what the expectations and standards, and then it's a more vested process. The party seeking to keep the bees is putting forth a greater effort in order to obtain that approval to do so. But in regards to enforceability, a permit does not enhance our enforceability at all whatsoever. It actually adds another layer before we would move on to the court system if someone was really indignant and refusing to comply with the standards in place. Does
Thank
that speak to your questions?
It does indeed, and succinct. I appreciate it very much. Real quickly, I'd like to have just some definition with respect to, we have these quote approvals or methods of obtaining permits. For example, under option B, if we want to change what we currently have and modify it, zoning clearance would be 8,000 square feet to 3 acres. If the person is in the animal, what's L again? Low animal? What's it? I forgot what L is.
Limited farm animal, like horses and I think a couple other farm
A is animal, L is something, and H is horses.
L is
Limited farm
limited,
animal.
animal overlay, H is horse keeping.
So under this one, a zoning, in order for them to get a permit, they simply have to have zoning clearance for 8,000 square feet if they're in the AL or H overlay zones.
Correct.
So they could have any size backyard. The majority of that 8,000 square feet could be the house and the front yard. You could have all sorts of uses back there. There's no method whatsoever for taking a look at it and saying, wait a minute, you got a pool that's half of, and a deck that's half your 2/3 of your backyard. And just because you're 50 feet from somebody's home and 7 foot from the wall, they're guaranteed a permit because they meet the zoning requirement, correct?
That would be correct.
And then to get outside the animal zoning overlays, you would have zoning clearance again, but if you're not in the animal overlay, you need 20,000 square feet to 3 acres. And then once again, the zoning clearance would simply be, you're in the right zone, period, and you meet those other limited requirements, such as the parallel facing of the hive and those kind, and number of feet from the wall, correct?
That's right.
Yes, Commissioner Hodge, you would
Yes.
submit the required documentation for the zoning clearance, and the city planning would issue that permit if the evidence is provided for the zoning clearance that shows compliance.
I get it, and I understand that. I mean, because if they meet the zoning, they're in. I mean, that's what I'm getting at, is the way these ordinances are written, there's very limited opportunity for interjecting, in my opinion, some additional reason into whether or not we should allow this kind of use, because we're going down to 8,000 square feet. But if you're in an overlay and there's no consideration of the size of the backyard. It's just an 8,000 square foot lot, which includes the house and it also includes the front yard.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit, I read this and I'm just looking at these opportunities for things that, would create mischief, things that we're not really, I think, hoping to achieve. And then, buying these assumptions being real and being good for us, because a few people didn't complain, or there aren't a lot of complaints in the city of Los Angeles or Santa Monica. And I was wondering about those complaints, and I was thinking, a bee stings me, a bunch of bees come into my backyard. How do I know that somebody up to 100 feet away has bees? I don't have the first clue. How do I know to go complain to the city? Why would I even think that? So maybe that there are a lot of other problems out there that are occurring that we don't know about, because it isn't a well-known thing that I have to believe that not a lot of people realize you can keep bees in residential zones in the city of Los Angeles. These are my basic questions, and Mr. Hittleman, we've not met, and I apologize if I sounded accusational, because I don't mean to be. I feel kind of passionate about this, and I really wanted to get these questions out. I very much appreciate your direct and straightforward answers. I truly do. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your questions. I thought they were very right on.
I have a couple of questions.
Please go ahead, Commissioner Gray.
Because I'm really liking some of the things that Commissioner Hodges is referring to, because I'm looking up like the homes that I've lived in Simi Valley, and realizing that I would have qualified under the 8,000 to 20,000 with a conditional use permit. And backyard is kind of an issue. So as long as it's 7 feet from the sides and sides in the rear, and no more than, or at least 50 feet from a structure, then any home in Simi Valley under A could get that. But isn't it also supposed to be 50 feet, or is that not included? Was that the way was that the old rules?
Yeah.
50 feet from a structure?
And that's an
other than its own
option
property?
B. Yeah, you're right. That's actually an option B.
So option A is if I got a conditional use permit, a lot from 8,000 to 20,000 square feet has no regulations on how close it could be to the next door neighbor's building or any structure that they would have?
That's right. That's how the
B.
draft ordinance is written right now. It would just be under option B.
That's
I can
on, that's the
interject.
existing, the 50 feet.
Commissioner Gray, this is Mr. Gibson. I can interject with that. If it's unclear with a 50-foot setback requirement, that certainly could be clarified in either case. If that's one of the final provisions you're looking at, that's certainly something we could look at. If that's unclear, if the 50-foot is there with or without a conditional use permit, that could be made part of your recommendation.
Mr. Gibson, I think you need to speak up.
Yeah, I'm having a difficult time hearing as well. I'm so sorry.
Okay, sorry. I will get a little closer here. The 50-foot provision can be clarified in the ordinance to be a requirement between the hive and an off-site house. If it's unclear in our current ordinance right now, that can be part of your recommendation if you go in that direction. And just to respond to Commissioner Hodge a little earlier, option A and option B are suggested options. There's always option C. Kind of pick and choose what you're looking at. This is kind of a starting point to go in the proper direction. Looking at the commission can make other recommendations to the planning commission, to the city council.
May I also interject too? Just to clarify, for option B, the 50-foot distance requirement would be required for the lots that are 8,000 to 20,000 square feet in the animal overlay zones.
Okay, so now I got to, doesn't matter, because bottom line is, we can make the 50 feet conditioned on whether we do option A, B, or hybrid A and B, and go to C. Because there seems to be some question that it looks like the 50 foot's not in A, and the 50 foot is in B, but it's got it under current limitations. But currently, under our current ordinance, there's a 50-foot requirement if you're in zones A, L, and H, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yes. Currently, it is 50 feet.
Okay. So it appears that it was just for whatever reason eliminated in option A, and it probably should have remained in option A like it was in B. So hence, we'll come up with option C if we go that route. Okay. Sorry for my interjection. Commissioner Gray, other questions?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Hodge, any questions?
I have no further questions.
Tim may want to talk again. Commissioner Rice.
The only thing I was going to suggest, and I think Commissioner Gray may have stolen my thunder here, which is fine. I was just going to suggest that regardless of if we decide to choose one of these, that 50 foot from a habitable structure is a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. Also, Commissioner Hodge brought up about the noticing, the 10-day noticing, and if we decide to go this route, I think that the noticing needs to be 2 weeks or 15 days, something like that, so that there's more time for people to think about it.
30.
Well, 30 days, whatever. That'd be just more than 10's just not enough. I agree with that. I think that what we could do is we could look at the setback, and maybe the setback, instead of being 7, maybe it's 10. That, and then the lot size, maybe 8,000 is too small a lot size, like Commissioner Hodge was saying. Maybe not 15, but if we do those things, if we did 10,000 foot lot size and 50 feet from a habitable structure and and a 10 foot setback, that really cuts down a lot of the homes in Simi Valley. So I don't know, I'd be willing to talk about it if we could, but those are things that I think that if we're going to do this, those are things I think have to be in there. So
if I may comment.
Please.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I probably should have prefaced all of this by saying, when I first saw that, I thought, oh, cool, a way to enhance the number of bees, and like bees don't bother me. They don't bother me a lick. I don't have an allergy to them. I suppose that changes my attitude about them quite a bit, and they've never bothered me. But at the same time, I realize that they do bother people. There are people with allergies, and there are things in these options, as well as things that have been entirely left out that have been discussed by other cities that we are missed, such as, what happens when somebody comes to, move in. You would literally have to do this. You would have to, if you lived within 100 feet of somebody, you have notice of this, and maybe it even has to be more than 100 feet. If you know that somebody has, it keeps bees, maybe 150 feet from your home, and you're about to sell your home to somebody, your realtor, I'm sure your real estate attorney would tell you that you need to give notice to people who are buying. You need to disclose that these bees, are being kept within a certain distance of the home that you have, just in case you have a bee allergy or your child has a bee allergy. We've left that completely out of the equation. We've left completely out of the equation people who live near senior centers, or there are homes right behind some of the senior care facilities that we have approved and that are being built. So you have people who can have beekeeping very close to, people, to elderly people. And that's why the city of San Juan Capistrano had this thing called bee-sensitive property. What about schools or recreation areas, these kinds of things that we just left out? My perception of this is this just not ready for prime time. I don't know where we've come up with 8,000 square feet just because LA and Ojai do it. And Santa Monica doesn't have a rule on this, but the overwhelming weight of the evidence is that our sister cities within Ventura County and those cities that were identified in Orange County, the vast majority of them don't allow this. And the only ones that I've seen require substantially more distance, and no one is even within half. Well, somebody's within half, somebody's 15,000 feet instead of 8,000 feet. But nobody gets a zoning clearance for 8,000 square feet. In the city of San Juan Capistrano, you've got to have quite a bit more. So once again, this is a text amendment that I beg your pardon?
I'm sorry, I thought you locked up, sorry.
Okay, this is a text amendment we're talking about, not, some ordinance that we can say, yeah, nah, it didn't work out, so we're going to change it. And I think that we just need to be a whole lot more careful. And I just don't see that we have the evidence. I mean, we currently allow beekeeping in the city of Simi Valley. Nobody in the county does that except for Ojai. That's it. We're number 2, I guess you could say, when it comes to being bee friendly. And to sit back and take a look at this and make the decision, we got to go with option A or option B, or is it 50 feet or 60? When I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I don't know, we've got current laws that allow you to go as many as 20,000 square feet and above. Nonetheless, us to come in and say we're going to do something like go to 8,000 square feet without quite a bit more evidence of its appropriateness. I think it's great that we don't have a lot of complaints, but what's going to happen if we do this wrong? How many complaints and how many hurt people and how many problems are we going to create for landowners inside our city, who buy a property and come to this, and next thing you find out, 2 days after they move in, that 2 doors over, somebody keeps bees. I just don't think that we've addressed all of these issues. The city council, when I watched their meeting, no one evidenced any kind of interest for bees in residential moderate or median. The idea is that we have, and I believe it was Mr. Hittleman who actually said at that meeting that, we have an ordinance, but it's all over the place and it needs to be put all in one batch, so all the rules are in one place to be found. I like the idea at this point of keeping the distances, keeping the locations where it's able to be done, providing everything in one spot as he talked about, so that if you're going to keep bees, there's no mention in there, for example, as I recall, about it's even right in the beginning of the staff report, about the things that it doesn't include our ordinance that it should include, like where the door is located and the height of the enclosure. A number of things that would all make a lot of sense to me. But before we start going and expanding the number of lots in Simi Valley, that can have this. I think we need to have a pack more information than anything that's been provided here.
Okay, Commissioner Tolson. Vice Chair Tolson, I apologize. Sir.
No problem. I appreciate David Werta being on the call today. I talked to him earlier today and invited him to come today. He mentioned that in Simi Valley, in the 2 zip codes that we have 7 registered beekeepers and 259 hives. And I asked him if there were perhaps other beekeepers that are not registered, and he said that for the most part, most beekeepers are going for the registration. There might be a handful that are outside that, and that would be maybe what we're talking about with regulations and code enforcement. In terms of what we're discussing tonight, I think the staff has done a great job in terms of putting some things together, and I like the comments of Commissioner Hodge and especially Commissioner Rice about the notification to the neighbors, extending the time to maybe 14 days, and if we need to, increase the lot size to 10,000 square feet. But I think the staff has done a great job in terms of presenting some ideas, and if we can come up with some slight modifications, I think we can move forward.
Okay, a couple of my, I guess, comments or thoughts. So I guess, and part of it is a question. If you have an 8,000 square foot lot and you're in an A, L, or H, you're allowed to currently keep bees, correct, in our city?
No, you cannot. You have to be in an animal overlay district of lots that are 20,000 square feet or larger. And that's with an administrative conditional use permit.
Okay, so the city's current standards allow beekeeping in A, L, or H. Then there's a period. Then it goes on. Administrative conditional use permits required for farm animal keeping, including being in properties located outside the overlay zone designations that are 20 square foot or larger. So is it possible that you can have a less than 20,000 square foot lot A, L, or H, or no?
Currently?
Yes.
No,
No?
not currently, I don't believe. Just under option B, you can do it with a zoning clear.
No, forget about option A and option B. I'm talking about currently. Are you allowed to have bees if you're in an A, L, or H under 20,000 square feet?
No, you'd have to be 20,000 square feet or larger. If you go, we have
Okay.
a slide that shows that.
So the whole idea of why we're going down to 8,000 square feet, I guess in theory, is just to make it more practical for individuals that decide they want to keep bees. Because obviously with 2 hives, this is not a commercial use. This is just somebody that wants to do their part, like having a victory garden, they want to now have bees.
That's correct. And that seemed to be the council direction at the initial meeting also.
Okay. This is, I guess, more for staff. Well, I guess anybody. Notifications, 10 days, I agree, is a little bit less or a little bit short. They should make it longer. 100 feet, I would even contest that the 100 feet is too short of time. But at the hearing, assume somebody says, I don't want to have bees in my neighborhood. You're gonna have 2 people at the hearing. Somebody at the city is gonna be the, lack of a better term, the administrative judge that says whether or not the person that wants the bees' rights are more relevant than the person that's saying, my kid's allergic to bees, I don't want them within 100 feet of my house. Is what happened at the hearing?
Much like at a planning commission hearing, the hearing officer, which is typically the deputy director, city planner, myself, would evaluate all evidence and testimony presented at that hearing and evaluate it and make that determination if there's, or add additional conditions of approval or other adjustments or restrictions to approve with conditions, or in some cases, the permit could be denied, or it could also be bumped up to the planning commission.
Okay, so there is, now, is there a quote-unquote appeal process if one of the parties say, I don't agree with that decision of you, they appeal it to planning, city council, where's it go?
yes, all administrative hearings do have an appeal process.
Okay.
So administrative hearing can be also appealed to the planning commission.
Okay. Very surprised, 7 beekeepers, 259 hives currently in the 2 zip codes in Simi. So, Mr. Warta, I'm assuming that one or multiple of those beekeepers, those are certainly commercial applications?
Yeah, likely. And it wasn't just within the city limits. I gave that number. It's also the surrounding area. So nearby Simi Valley was what I was
Okay.
asked for as well. So
'Cause, yeah, I mean, you drive up Tapple Canyon certain times of the year, you see just
yeah,
hundreds of
That's-
hives, if lack of a better term, or tens of hives all over the place. So again, I'm assuming that's commercial applications. Okay, thank you very much for that. I have no other comments or statements or questions. Any other commissioners have any comments, statements, questions of staff?
I guess I just have some statements.
Please.
I am very concerned that it seems that it's very basic. That there should be more when you want to, build a structure in your backyard. That seems to be that there's more requirements. I like the fact that if there's adjacent doors, including the neighbors, that some of our neighbors can be extremely close to each other, but the lot size might be long enough. But still, if you're 7 feet from your side yard, but your neighbors have a door that's on the other side, I think there should be some sort of a distance requirement for that. In addition to outdoor living, that you could have a neighbor that's got their barbecue or their patio set sitting on a pavers or even a structure, and it could be a nuisance while they're out there barbecuing, or it could be it's maybe not even a nuisance, but it could just be something that is a potential nuisance. Again, distance from the backyard and adjoining properties. I'm not sure if 7 feet is necessarily the appropriate spacing. I like the fact that notifying neighbors, the idea of saying, and I don't think it should just be 100 feet, and it must be disclosed not only on a sales, but also if you're going to rent out your property, so that somebody that is moving in knows that 500 feet down or whatever that distance is. I think it needs to be a little bit longer. I agree with the 30-day. I think that's a great suggestion. And it almost does, maybe because I'm very new to this whole process, if we go with option B or something like option B, if it's just the zoning clearance, does that mean that they don't actually get any sort of a permit and the city doesn't know about it or the county doesn't know about it? They just have to adhere to the zoning itself? Or do they actually have to file something?
Filing with the county agricultural commissioner would still be required, as well as the state.
Okay, that was my question on that. Yeah, our house, we had bees in our chimney. It was they weren't bothering us, but they certainly were bothering the chimney, and it took a long time to get rid of them. And our neighbor on our first house, they had a hive that decided to lay claim to their tree. And it was interesting at the time that a friend of mine worked at a bee removal place, and she had said, well, if they're there after an hour, they're staying. Otherwise, the queen might be resting and they're on their way someplace. But I understand that, you could have a hive 2.5 miles away and bees come around, and I always have bee-friendly plants, which I think is fantastic. It's just, I'm very concerned about people with allergies and possibly that with a permit that they should be required to have insurance for something like that. But then again, you can't determine whose bee bit you or stung you. I just feel that this should have a little bit more structure to it.
Okay, any other last comments?
Yeah, I have a real quick comment. Part of the discussion tonight has included whether or not there have been problems in the past. I don't want to buy problems. I mean, that's great that there haven't been a lot of problems in the past. I don't know if, in fact, the number of complaints that have been actually registered with the city with the county or the city of Los Angeles for that matter, or actually the number of problems that have been committed, because bees occur naturally all the time, and who knows that anybody's bees did cause a problem, but who knows that they didn't. Somebody gets bit, somebody has some bees bother them. It's the kind of thing that you don't know. We haven't considered, we've talked about how there's this 6 foot height barrier, and that they don't tend to come down right away. They don't come down till later, but then you've got people who live later, and you've got people who have balconies on their homes, and they're at that height. So, I mean, there's just so many things that we haven't considered in this. And, you know, the idea of changing it to 10,000 square feet, I think makes as much sense to me, and I apologize, Commissioner Tolson, but it makes as much sense to me evidentiarily, evidence-wise, as 8,000 square feet. There is no basis upon which to say that other cities are using this distance, or this size rather, and that they're not having problems, or that it seems to make sense. In fact, all we have is City of LA, which is a big city. We don't have any information regarding the rest of the cities in that county. We don't have any information regarding Burbank and Glendale and some other cities, Santa Clarita, that are Santa Clarita would be a good example of a city they have that are actual cities on their own. I think Santa Clarita is. I mean, I hope I'm not getting that wrong. But one of these cities out there that makes sense, you know, Lancaster, that have you know, bee ordinances. We don't know. I don't know if this was cherry picked or what's going on, but the majority of the evidence is that the majority of cities don't allow this kind of use. We are already at the, you know, the highest, the second or third highest use in Southern California from cities that we've been identified. And all of a sudden we're going to reduce that size by a factor of 250%. And without any particular evidence that particular size, 8,000 square feet, has any fact in basis, in fact, rather, of being something which works. I'd like to see us, if we do anything, recommend to the city council that they, you know, do some of these other things to create context and the other rules that are identified early on in the staff report, and have them consider you know, the size limitation of 20,000 square feet outside the animal layer, outside the animal area, as a first step. You've got 20,000 feet that you can have now with animal, low animal and horse currently, and maybe we can do it outside of that, and we can take baby steps and move along and see how this works. But instead of just taking, you know, a whole great big giant bite at the apple and hoping that it will work, I don't think that we're serving the city council with that recommendation very well. It doesn't address all kinds of issues, like the bee sensitive neighbors, you know, the schools, these kinds of things, the senior citizen facilities, or the care facilities, the one on Royal that is, I guess it's just opened. I mean, it's right next to homes, right next to homes, and people would be able to have bees there if there are lots for 8,000 square feet. And having lived in that area in the past, I can tell you some do. So you've heard me speak too much tonight. I thank everyone for listening, but I really hope that we do not recommend that the city council adopt either A or B, that we identify some of the things in it that make some sense, and recommend that at a maximum they try to move slowly to enhance the areas of usage. Specifically, for example, 20,000 square feet for AL and H, we can, you know, do that conditional use permit outside of that overlay.
Last call for any commissioners to speak? Okay.
I'm okay with what Commissioner Hodge said. Makes a lot of sense to me. You know, he's made me think a lot more about that text amendment, and he's absolutely right. Once you put it down there, it's really hard to get it back. So I'm going to concur with Commissioner Hodge.
Okay, so typically at this point, we would do the reading of the resolution, and according to my little schedule here, we can either adopt A, B, or we can recommend denial. Is a continuance an option, as in any public hearing, for the staff to go back and come back with something else that may be more in line with option C?
So you have you have a few choices here.
Thank you.
One of the options is if we keep it at the 20,000 square foot limit, we can make a recommendation to that effect and kind of drop everything below 20,000 square feet. Add the suggested provisions for all beekeeping starting at 20,000 square feet and above. Possibly adjust the 50-foot habitable setback. Perhaps if noticing is required for the non-overlay areas, a 2-week notice, and also a general 10-foot setback as a couple standards.
You mean the 30-day notice?
Or a 30-day notice. You can make those suggestions as part of that, or you can continue it to a date.
And as well as distance from school, senior centers, and daycare centers.
Yeah, we've talked about a 50-foot from the closed structure. Are we talking about making that further for school seniors and listing out items to a further away, or keep it at 50 feet from any structure? Or
I would like to see more distance for school, senior centers, and daycare centers. Not, I mean, 50 feet seems like it's not. It's not enough.
It's a distance without a purpose. I mean, it's kind of nominal. You know, there are some other cities that did address that. I think the city of, it's not Oxnard, I think within it's one of the cities within Ventura County addressed that particular issue. Mr. Gibson, I think your suggestion is a good one. We don't have, as I recall, I don't know if you can get it done this quickly, but at the next Planning Commission meeting, we apparently only have an informational item. I think if somebody were to go back and sort of watch the meeting or parts of this meeting again, that we could include all of those. I agree with Commissioner Gray that some additional space needs to be built in, or, you know, or if nothing else, you know, when you decide what the requirements would be for the person, for example, an administrative CUP. The CUP could include considerations such as proximity to these bee-sensitive locations, which makes a lot of sense to me because, you know, if you find out that somebody, I mean, I hate to be extreme about this, I don't know that it is, but if you find out you've got some place, for example, a senior center place that has a garden, and that senior center place is close to people, you know, somebody wants to keep bees, and they have a large place, maybe a farming area or something like that, where bees might have a tendency to come to, you could at least in the CUP process consider that. Or if the school was on a certain side, it's all buildings, on the backside, it's all, you know, football fields or something like that, that could be a consideration because the people are coming in and out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, in the front, and that's where large numbers of people would be. You could consider those things in the CUP process. So I don't know that we have to come up with a specific foot, but at least I'd like to see, you've got to have an administrative CUP and those considerations built into the analysis.
That's correct. For our CUP process now for farm animals on properties without an overlay district, we have that conditional use permit process. There are no special standards, but the CUP itself would evaluate the surroundings and uses, and staff can apply conditions of approval, and that certainly could be addressed as for beekeeping as well, where additional standards or restrictions could be imposed as part of that conditional use permit.
Yes, and if you list them as examples, those would be easier to defend, I think, if people come and want to have it, but you know, want to have the permit, but in fact, they've got all these other issues that can objectively be evaluated.
So again, at this point, what's the pleasure of the commission? Do we proceed with a vote for acceptance with conditions? Do we put it back for, lack of better terms, a continuance to come back with option C as the hybrid? Do we approve it subject to them, you know, making the changes? What do we do?
I don't have the language to say it, but what I'd very much like to see is staff come back with a modified presentation for an ordinance consistent with the discussion that we've just completed. I think staff can do it and it would be done well.
I'm okay with a continuance.
Well, I guess, again, is a continuance an option? I guess under most hearings, continuance normally is.
Yes, the continuance is an option. That's your choice. We would recommend probably continuance to a date certain, and I'd probably recommend February 17th at the earliest.
Okay. 'Cause I know we
Good
have,
with me.
I know we have a meeting on February 3rd. That's basically.
We do. It would be a quick turnaround because basically the report has to be done tomorrow. So
Okay. Do we have anything on the 17th already?
I believe we have one conditional use permit for a drive-through facility.
Okay. So it shouldn't be that long. So I'd be okay with a continuance until the date certain of the 17th without a problem. Other commissioners, consent?
I agree.
Agreed.
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 Okay. So we'll put this off as a continuance until a date certain of February 17th, 2021, and come back with a much shorter, smaller, modified Plan C and see if we can get this thing through.
Very good.
Okay, I see no other new business. Oral communications and reports.
And again, good evening, Chairman, members of the commission. We have a tentative agenda for February 3rd. Again, it's an informational presentation to kick off the housing element update to cover years 2021 through 2029. Our housing consultants will be making a presentation, and the public is invited to view the meeting, and they will have the opportunity to make public comments.
Do we have,
It's not a public hearing, but it'll just be the ability to make public statements.
do we have review or revise or arena numbers that will be presented, or we're still on the old ones?
That should be included in the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
And second, again, welcome aboard, Commissioner Ray. The Planning Commission Academy by the League of California Cities, we expect that information to come out soon. There's supposed to be a date and time in March or April. We'll get that to you. We're just waiting for the registration and fees and information, and potentially 2 to maybe all of you, depending on the cost, could choose to attend. It's probably a virtual meeting. So we'll get that out to you and would encourage you to try to attend.
Perfect. Any planning commissioners or anything else, sorry?
I
I had one small thing. I just wanted to, I mean, we've already done this, but I wanted to welcome Commissioner Gray to the commission, and I look forward to working with you and your perspective. And you got off easy. This was a pretty easy meeting. That's all.
Thank you.
Yeah, normally we're fighting over Mexican palms and what tree do you like, Commissioner Rice, so much?
The crepe myrtle, yes. I'm not a fan.
Crepe myrtles. We're fighting over whether or not we can have crepe myrtle.
And parking
No,
spaces.
Commissioner, interesting meeting tonight. I very much appreciate your contribution and look forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this experience myself.
Vice Chair Tolson?
Welcome aboard.
And let it not go unnoticed. There were no donuts here, but that's okay. We will wait for your first official meeting that you attend, Commissioner Gray. But it did not go unnoticed. Mobile Home Rent Mediation Board?
No items tonight.
Tree Advisory Board?
And no items tonight.
Adjournment. This concludes the meeing of January 20th. Next scheduled meeting is February.
Oh, before we adjourn, I'm sorry. Mr. Gibson, did we get a letter about Tree City USA? I got an email today from Tree City USA saying we hadn't filled out paperwork or something. Did you get something like that?
Commissioner Rice has not crossed
All
my
right.
desk. I'll keep an eye out for it, or if you want to forward that to me, I could follow up on that.
I will forward that to you. Okay, thank you.
Obviously, Commissioner Rice is now our self-appointed tree person for Tree City USA. So yeah, please keep us informed. Thank you very much. Okay, back to adjournment for tonight's meeting. Next scheduled meeting is Wednesday, February 3rd. Until then, everyone, be safe, be healthy, and have a great week.